Hello there and welcome back to the Sleepy Science. You're floating, drifting weightlessly through a quiet sea of stars somewhere just past Neptune's sleepy orbit. Out here, the sun is no brighter than a particularly stubborn nightlight, and the silence feels thick, like velvet stretched over infinity. Ahead of you, gliding with a kind of lazy certainty, is a visitor. Not a spaceship, not a comet, not quite anything we've seen before. This is 3I Atlas, and it doesn't belong here. It's just entered our solar system, uninvited but strangely mesmerizing, and you're tagging along as if this was always meant to be your ride. You probably won't survive this journey, at least not in the form you know now, but that's a problem for later. Right now, you're tumbling gently alongside a relic from interstellar space, a thing that's likely been travelling for millions of years, weaving through gravitational currents like a boat with no oars and all the time in the world. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You first spotted 3I Atlas in the headlines, maybe. A blur, a speck, a statistical anomaly. One astronomer called it a rock with commitment issues, while another dubbed it the solar system's rudest guest. Discovered in late 2024 by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, Atlas, hence the name, this object was classified as the third confirmed interstellar visitor, following 1E ʻOumuamua and 2E Borisov. But unlike those earlier travellers, Atlas brought gifts, or problems, or maybe questions we weren't ready to ask. As it crosses the orbit of Neptune, you glide closer and note its unusual behaviour. Unlike ʻOumuamua, which tumbled end over end like a rogue rotisserie chicken, Atlas is more, graceful. It rotates with a kind of mechanical rhythm, a spin that suggests intentionality, or at the very least remarkable symmetry. And its surface? Not the dull charcoal of a typical asteroid. This thing shimmers like wet metal or obsidian dusted with powdered sugar. Scientists are still arguing whether its albedo readings even make sense. Fringe theorists were on this like hawks on a field mouse. Within hours of its discovery, someone on Reddit claimed Atlas was a disguised alien beacon. Another forum said it was a piece of galactic trash expelled by a long-dead civilization. A YouTuber called it the smoking gun of the Great Filter. You watch all this from the passenger seat, sipping metaphorical tea and pretending not to be intrigued. What's truly strange, though, is how it behaves near Neptune's orbit. Most interstellar objects, ʻOumuamua being the textbook case, simply slingshot through the solar system, pulled along by the sun's gravity before exiting back into deep space, fast in, fast out. But Atlas seems curious. It slows slightly, adjusts its trajectory. Not much, but enough to make every space agency perk up like a cat hearing a can opener. One theory suggests it grazed a small Neptunian moon, Despine maybe, and picked up a gravitational nudge. Another posits that the object's internal structure is hollow, or at least flexible enough to flex under tidal forces, altering its path. One guy in Wyoming insists it's steering. He has a PowerPoint. Either way, the result is clear. Atlas veers slightly inward, nudging its way closer to Mars' orbital path. Not directly toward the planet, no, but just close enough that the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter starts watching with slightly more attention than usual. Meanwhile, down on Earth, entire departments suddenly cancel their weekend plans. The European Space Agency extends several telescope observation windows, and over in Hawaii, the Pan-STARRS team collectively forgets to blink for about 36 hours. You hover nearby, a silent, invisible observer. There's no sound in space, of course, but if there were, Atlas might hum. Not a mechanical hum, not something made by gears or wires, but a kind of resonant stillness, like the feeling you get when standing alone in a massive cathedral, unsure if you're supposed to be there. Historically speaking, interstellar visitors have always inspired awe. The Babylonians tracked wandering stars with obsessive precision. The Greeks thought comets were divine messengers. Even in the 19th century, astronomers like Percival Lowell gazed at Mars and imagined grand civilizations carving canals across its dusty surface. Historians still argue whether Lowell's drawings were wishful thinking, poor optics, or the birth of science fiction. But the common thread? Every time the skies give us something strange, we project onto it. We can't help it, and 3I Atlas is the strangest gift yet. You drift along with it as it crosses the orbit of Uranus. Not that Uranus notices. It's been feeling neglected since Voyager 2 ghosted it in the 80s. Atlas doesn't respond to solar radiation the way comets do. There's no outgassing, no dramatic coma of ice particles. It simply glides, eerily clean and silent. Some telescopes report minor spectral emissions, barely detectable, suggesting trace elements of nickel, possibly iron, and something unclassified that absorbs more light than it reflects. You squint. Still looks like a fancy rock. As it reaches the outer edge of the asteroid belt, a decision is made back on Earth. Let's listen harder. NASA reroutes a deep space listening array usually reserved for pulsars. What comes back isn't noise, it isn't radio, it's more like an absence, a blank patch in the data, like someone used a spade-sized eraser. You're not even sure what that means, but it sounds ominous enough to keep you interested. And then, just as Atlas brushes near Mars's orbital plane, something happens. A data packet arrives at a ground station in Canberra. It's faint, almost corrupted, but there's structure. Rows and columns, grid lines, pixels, Atlas has sent an image. Not of itself, not of stars, of Mars. Let that settle in. An interstellar object, with no observable tech, sends back a high-contrast, low-resolution image of Mars, a planet it passed only briefly, and it's not even supposed to have instruments. Sleepy science indeed. You lean in closer, not physically of course, since you're still adrift in the gentle vacuum near the asteroid belt, but mentally you're all in now. This shouldn't be possible. The idea of an object like 3I Atlas sending an image is the kind of twist that makes astrophysicists choke on their lukewarm instant coffee. It doesn't have antennas, it doesn't have solar panels, it doesn't even seem to rotate in a way that would suggest signal modulation. And yet, the signal exists. The transmission is real. Somewhere in that oddly silent package is a flat, monochrome image of Mars. It's grainy, slightly distorted, and tilted at an odd angle, like someone handed a phone to a toddler and asked for a panorama. Still, there's no mistaking what it shows: the ochre-toned planet, sliced by the shadow, and glimmering with distant dust storms. The image itself is enough to spark something bordering on international frenzy. Some think it's a fluke, maybe a reflection. A freak alignment where solar particles and Atlas's oddly smooth surface conspire to act like a pinhole lens. Others whisper about quantum resonance and exotic matter, terms that sound like sci-fi but are just obscure enough to be real. But the bigger point? This isn't normal. An Atlas, as you'll come to appreciate, is anything but normal. You trace your memory back to the other two interstellar interlopers. Remember ʻOumuamua, the cosmic cigar that tumbled past us in 2017? It too left behind questions. Its odd acceleration, its shape, its reflectivity. Some swore it was an alien probe, others said it was just a hydrogen iceberg behaving badly. Then came Borisov in 2010, a more traditional comet, at least in appearance, icy, dusty, dramatic, like it belonged in a planetarium show narrated by Morgan Freeman. But Atlas is different. It doesn't conform to either of those models. It's not icy, it's not tumbling, it's not behaving like a visitor, it's behaving like an observer. There's a difference. You don't feel watched exactly, but you do feel included, like you've been pulled into someone else's documentary and you're not sure what your role is yet. The transmission of the image stirs chaos across the world's major space agencies. NASA holds an emergency press briefing at 3 a.m. where the spokesperson spends 20 minutes saying nothing at all, expertly. Meanwhile, the European Space Agency simply posts the image to their social media account with the caption, "Well, this just got weird. Mood." The Chinese National Space Administration says they're analysing additional data and then promptly go dark. Everyone's watching, everyone's speculating. And the object itself? Atlas keeps drifting, slow and steady, as if none of this concerns it. Like a tourist that dropped off a cryptic postcard and just kept walking. The image is dissected pixel by pixel. It's grayscale but rich with contrast, deeper shadows than expected, particularly for the northern hemisphere. The Tharsis region is visible, barely, and there's a curious glint near the rim of Olympus Mons. Could be ice, could be artifacting, could be your imagination, stirred by too many YouTube comment sections. Fringe groups, emboldened by the image's sudden virality, start pointing out geometric shapes. A triangle here, a crosshatch there. One particularly excitable forum insists you can see a faint A in the dust trails. For Atlas, naturally. Mainstream scientists aren't exactly calm either. One peer-reviewed journal, Astrobiology Monthly, quietly withdraws a paper it had in review, unsure if its conclusions are already obsolete. After all, if a rock with no discernible tech just sent us a picture of Mars, what else might it be capable of? A small lab in Tokyo claims that when the image's frequency data is converted into audio, it produces a low rhythmic tone, a kind of pulse. Nothing organised, just a beat, like distant drumming heard through heavy snow. You're not sure whether to believe them, but you close your eyes for a second, letting the imagined rhythm settle somewhere behind your eyelids. It's oddly soothing, or maybe just hypnotic. Here's a fun twist. Historians of all people start to weigh in. A medieval scholar in Florence suggests that this mirrors an old tale from the Codex Gigas, a 13th century manuscript that mentions a sky stone that gazed back. Historians still argue whether that reference was metaphorical, literal, or the result of someone eating spoiled rye bread. Either way, people are paying attention. Even your weird uncle who still uses a flip phone texts you with a link to a podcast titled The Watcher Above Mars. You drift back to Atlas. It's now midway between Mars and the asteroid belt, moving at a velocity that doesn't quite match solar expectations. Too fast to be orbiting, too slow to be entirely ballistic. It's almost like it's gliding, pacing itself, waiting for something. Spacecraft sent to observe its struggle to catch up. Probes are launched, yes, but they take weeks or months to close the distance. For now, humanity is watching through telescopes, running simulations, and guessing in the dark. Which brings us to the truly unsettling part. The image itself wasn't the only data. Embedded deep within the transmission are metadata fields, unlabeled but structured. Like a JSON file written in a forgotten dialect of physics. A few astrophysicists get twitchy over the alignment of the timestamp with Mars' own rotational markers. Somehow the image appears to have been taken at precisely midday in the Martian region of Arabia Terra. That level of precision isn't something you get from random bouncing particles. It suggests targeting, intention. Meanwhile, amateur astronomers keep pointing backyard telescopes in the direction of Atlas, hoping for a miracle. A teen in Australia thinks he spots a shimmer, a flash like a pulse of light. The signal isn't repeated. Probably lens flare. Probably... You're not even pretending this is boring anymore. And then, almost comically, someone at JPL notices something simple. Something that had been overlooked in the image because everyone was so busy decoding shadows and pixel ratios. It's the framing, the way Mars sits slightly off-center in the picture. Not quite symmetrical. It's the kind of composition you'd expect if someone were capturing something else in the frame. As if the subject wasn't the planet at all, but something near it. It reminds you of old family photos where you realise, years later, that the important part wasn't Grandpa smiling in the foreground. It was the person sneaking out the back door in the background. So you look again, and you notice it. A blur. A dark smear in the corner of the image. Too angular to be dust, too defined to be glitch. An object, not on Mars, floating near it, possibly in orbit, possibly not. Everyone missed it the first time. But now all you can do is stare. You stare at the blur in the image like it's going to move. Like maybe if you focus hard enough it'll twitch or shift or wave politely and confirm what your brain doesn't want to say out loud. It won't, of course. It's a still frame. A few hundred dusty kilobytes pulled from the void. But that's the thing. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It sits there in the bottom left corner, partially obscured by the grainy darkness, just close enough to Mars to feel deliberate, just far enough to make you question everything. It's not an artifact, not one of those sensor hiccups that sometimes makes even the Hubble Space Telescope see imaginary things. This has structure, straight edges, angles, possibly even symmetry. If you're feeling generous with your imagination, could be a satellite, could it be a rock, or, and this is what keeps you awake, it could be a craft. Official statements naturally sidestep the implication. NASA describes it as a localized anomaly. ESA goes with image aberration. The internet, of course, goes foul. Within hours, someone's already overlaid the shape with every known spacecraft ever launched toward Mars. It doesn't match anything. Not a probe, not a lander, not even debris. The blur is too far out to be something on the surface and too stable to be a passing object. It looks parked, like it's waiting. So what do you do when you spot a ghost car in a satellite image of a red desert planet? Well, if you're Earth's collective space brain, you start recalculating everything. Teams at Jet Propulsion Lab and Caltech begin simulating the trajectory that would place the object, whatever it is, exactly in that position at the time of the Atlas image capture. And here's where things get uncomfortable. The blur doesn't match anything tracked. Nothing should be there. Not from Earth, not from any known mission, and not from nature either. Mars has no moonlets in that orbit, and any rogue asteroid would have been flagged by now. One team runs the math backward and realizes that if the object were moving, its projected path would have intersected Mars's atmosphere almost 20 years ago. In other words, if it was moving, it should have crashed. So either it defied gravity, or it never moved at all. Historians weigh in again, because of course they do. One brings up a 1901 report from Percival Lowell, yes, the Martian Canal guy, claiming that during one of his late-night observations he saw a dark silhouette against the Martian edge that he described as seeming to drift with quiet purpose. Historians still argue whether Lowell actually saw anything, or if his telescope just had a coffee stain on the lens. But now that ancient quote feels eerily relevant. Meanwhile, the Atlas object, our quiet little interstellar lurker, keeps drifting on, utterly unfazed by the chaos it's left behind. But back here on Earth and Mars, things are heating up. Someone points out that the image's metadata suggests the photo wasn't taken passively. No, there's a focusing pattern. Light from Mars was compressed and then broadened in an arc. That's not something that happens naturally, that's optics. Not primitive lenses, but something better, something exotic. So you begin to wonder, could Atlas have a camera? Not a clunky metal one like we use, but a light-sensitive surface, a biological sensor, or a reactive membrane that captures information without needing to store it in hard drives or memory banks, a living film, a planetary-scale retina. Suddenly Atlas isn't just a visitor, it's a witness. And witnesses usually have reasons. Theories spiral out like space dust from a new impact crater. Maybe Atlas passed through another star system that left something on it. Microbial life, intelligent nanites, or just strange cosmic radiation that now gives it this ghostly image-sending capability. Maybe it was built, not by life as we know it, but by something we wouldn't even recognize as sentient. Maybe it's a probe made of material we can't yet understand, self-healing, self-steering, and curious. And then there's the darker theory. Maybe it's not the one doing the watching, maybe it's being watched through. A lens, yes, but not for our benefit. Someone or something on the other side, looking in. No one says that part out loud, not yet. You revisit the image again. You've stared at it so long that every bump on Mars looks like it's breathing. And that blur, well, it's gained a nickname now. Some forums call it the Watcher, others prefer Hex 1, thanks to a sharpening filter someone ran that revealed faint angular features. One image enhancement suggests the shape is six-sided, which would be fine, except that the next day, a geology expert points out that natural hexagonal formations can occur, but not in space, and certainly not hovering in stable orbits, so what gives? A retired Russian cosmonaut writes a blog post, very long, very meandering, recalling a classified mission in the 1980s where cosmonauts allegedly saw a hexagonal shadow pass over Mars. Historians still argue whether he made it up for attention, or if vodka and vacuum-sealed meals had finally taken their toll. But it goes viral anyway, because of course it does. And still, Atlas moves on. By now, everyone's trying to guess its next step. Will it loop around the Sun? Will it slingshot toward Earth? Toward Jupiter? Or just vanish into the outer dark, leaving a trail of data and existential dread? Here's the part no one's really talking about. The object's trajectory wasn't supposed to come this close to Mars. Its path was initially projected to bypass the inner solar system almost entirely, but near Saturn it shifted. Not by much, just a few degrees, but enough. Enough to catch Mars in its lens. Enough to frame the planet in a single cryptic image. Enough to catch that thing into the background. Was it chance? Was it design? Or, worst of all, was it invitation? You try to shake the thought, but it hangs there, heavy and humming like a forgotten machine still running in the basement. You float quietly in your imaginary orbit, watching this drama unfold from your invisible vantage point, wondering if perhaps this is what the early skywatchers felt. Those first humans who looked up and saw Mars burning red in the night sky and assumed it meant war. Now we see it again, burning, but not with fire, this time with questions. And somewhere far ahead, Atlas drifts on, still watching, still not explaining itself. The problem with a mystery this large, this wide and slow and utterly silent, is that it refuses to be ignored. You try, for a moment, to let it drift to the back of your mind like space junk behind a fading satellite, but it doesn't. It stays there, patient and weightless, like Atlas itself. The second image arrives exactly 48 hours after the first. No fanfare, no signal warning, just another quiet download beamed into a receiver array in Spain, tucked away in a dusty hard drive until someone double-checks the telemetry and nearly falls out of their chair. Another image, same resolution, same grayscale tone, same slightly disoriented, off-kilter composition. Except this time it's worse. Because now there are two blurs. The second image shows a slightly different angle of Mars. Not much, just a shift in orbital position, but the background holds a new object, a faint crescent curved unnaturally, like a parenthesis turned sideways and thrown into the void. And the first blur, it's still there, same location, unmoved, stable. So, either there's more than one of these things, or the original one has a friend. Scientists begin to mumble phrases like possibly artificial satellite behavior and persistent object clustering. The rest of us, floating beside you in this dreamy panic, start asking better questions. Like, why is an interstellar object we didn't know existed 3 months ago suddenly taking photographs of Mars with apparent consistency? And how, in a solar system full of brighter, more interesting planets, did it manage to fixate on this one? Dusty, rusty, mostly dead Mars. Unless that's exactly the point. Some researchers suggest the possibility of gravitational lensing, that maybe Atlas doesn't have a camera in the way we understand it, but that its unusual surface and internal mass distribution act like a light collector. Sort of like when ice forms on your windshield and turns the sunrise into a kaleidoscope. But for that to work, you would need precise alignment. Mars would have to be in the right place. Atlas would have to spin just so, and the timing? Perfect. Suspiciously perfect. The math works technically, but the odds don't. The betting pool opens quietly among observatory interns, mostly for fun, mostly out of stress. Wagers on what Atlas will send next. A colour photo, a message, a blurry selfie. A few bold guesses include an audio file, a radar scan, or even a video. But deep down, you know it won't be any of those. Atlas doesn't operate on our terms. It doesn't care what we expect. It sends what it sends, and then it happens. Not a new image, but something worse. A sequence, 3 frames, blurry black and white again, stitched together by the faintest suggestion of movement. Not Mars this time, no planetary surface, no recognizable terrain, just shadows, lines, angles, something angular passing briefly through the field of view, as if Atlas turned slightly on purpose to show you what's behind the curtain. You blink, rewind, blink again. There is motion, something turns, not fast but deliberate, a rotation, the hexagonal blur, remember that? It's not stationary anymore. It shifts orientation between frames. Whether it's rolling, pivoting, or adjusting a sensor of its own, you can't tell. But it moved. That's the moment Earth scientists drop all pretense. Private Slack channels, encrypted emails, and long Zoom calls without agendas suddenly spiral into full speculative overdrive. Someone at MIT leaks an internal memo. Movement suggests maneuverability. Maneuverability suggests intent. Intent. There's the word everyone was avoiding. But now it's here, hanging in the air like a dropped wrench in zero gravity. Historians jump back in because they never actually left. One points us out that the movement shown in the image sequence eerily mirrors an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph, a hexagonal sky symbol found in a tomb painting dated to roughly 1300 BCE. It was dismissed at the time as artistic flair, maybe stylized representation of a star or planet, but now, well, historians still argue whether ancient peoples actually saw something in the sky, or whether we're just retrofitting our own fears into their art. It's probably the latter, but probably doesn't do much to stop the chills crawling down your back to Atlas. You drift with it, following its silent glide toward the inner solar system. Mars now sits in its rear view, assuming it even has one, and it's on a course that bends its path toward the Sun. Not a collision path, but close. Solar observatories are preparing to track it. One clever engineer hacks a solar probe's camera firmware to prioritize Atlas over solar flare detection. A small price to pay for the truth, and still, no emissions, no heat signature, no detectable engine or propulsion system. Just slow, elegant acceleration, likely driven by gravitational slingshot or, some now whisper, by something we don't yet understand. Maybe a manipulation of solar wind, maybe controlled photon pressure, maybe something else entirely. And the blur? It's still visible, now confirmed in 6 different telescopic images. It's not debris, it's not artifact, and it's not leaving. If anything, it's following. Theories spiral like water circling a drain. Maybe the blur is a Martian satellite launched in prehistory by a lost civilization. Maybe it's a dormant alien observer activated by Atlas's arrival. Maybe Mars was never dead, just dormant, waiting, watching through that hexagonal eye until the right moment arrived, until the right trigger passed through its skies. One brave podcast host suggests that Atlas didn't come to observe, it came to wake something up. You smile at that, even as the shiver crawls up your spine like cold breath in a dark hallway, because that's the part no one really wants to say out loud. What if Atlas didn't take the image at all? What if it only relayed it? Like a messenger bird that carries someone else's words. If that's true, then the real observer isn't Atlas. It's the blur, the hex, the watcher, and Atlas is just its mirror. So you float beside this cosmic postman, waiting to see if it turns its gaze toward Earth next. You hope it doesn't, but deep down, you know it will. You don't sleep well the night after the sequence is released. Not that you're supposed to be sleeping, this is sleepy science after all. But there's a particular kind of insomnia that sets in when the universe starts making eye contact. It's that itchy feeling that creeps up from your stomach and settles behind your ears, a mix of excitement, dread, and a hunch that you're no longer the one watching the sky. Because here's the part no one can explain. Three-eyed Atlas isn't supposed to do anything. It's a rock, maybe an interstellar iceberg, maybe a chunk of magnetic space fluff with attitude. Whatever it is, it shouldn't have optics, or motion sensors, or a schedule, and it absolutely shouldn't be transmitting, let alone transmitting with rhythm and purpose. But as more data rolls in, something drubistus than all the shadows and blurs begins to unfold. Somehow, Atlas seems to be using a camera. Not a physical one, no glass lenses, no aperture, but the data from the transmission, the signature of how the light was focused, polarized, and compressed, suggests a pattern eerily similar to what you'd get from a high-speed imaging system, specifically one used for surveillance. You let that sink in for a moment. This rock took a picture, or something very much like a picture. Spectral analysis shows faint evidence of layered refraction, as if the surface of Atlas responded dynamically to incoming light, like certain smart materials on Earth that adjust their properties in response to environmental conditions. There's a class of materials back home called photonic crystals, often studied in nanotech research, that can bend light based on tiny structural changes. Atlas might be covered in something like that, natural or not. Here's a fringe idea that somehow slips its way into a legitimate university press conference. What if Atlas isn't a probe in the traditional sense, but a kind of bioluminescent sensor? A shell, a membrane, a reactive surface, one that doesn't see like us but still captures and stores information. You drift in your imagined orbit, trying to picture it, something alien, drifting for millennia, picking up light like a jellyfish snags bioluminescence in the deep sea. Historians again show up with their usual sense of perfect miming. A linguist from Prague finds a passage in an ancient Janist text that refers to the traveller without eyes that sees all. He's probably reaching, but he posts a side-by-side comparison of the translated verse and the data structure of the Atlas images. They line up a little too well. Historians still argue whether this is pattern recognition run amok or something stranger, like memory running backwards through time. And as for the surface of Atlas, it doesn't just reflect light, it absorbs it, metabolizes it. At least that's the new theory. An astrochemist studying its spectral return points out that the object seems to process solar radiation differently, depending on its angle of approach. When Atlas drifts closer to the Sun, it doesn't brighten like a normal rock would. It darkens, sharply. That's not reflectivity. That's photoresponse, like skin. So now people are asking new kinds of questions. Is it alive? Does it feel light? Is it awake? The Martian images are reviewed again. A team of researchers at Arecibo, rebuilt since its collapse, now operating under a tight cloak of classified protocols, run a digital sweep of the noise around the image. A weird thing happens. Buried deep in the signal, in frequencies we don't normally look at, is a pattern. Regular pulsing and low frequency. Not audio, not radio, not visual, something in between, like a heartbeat made of math. You listen to it late one night through a synthesizer filter someone posted online. It's soft, gentle, 4 pulses, pause, 4 pulses again. One person in the comments says it sounds like breathing, another says it's Morse code, another says it's just pareidolia, our old friend who loves to turn clouds into dragons and static into signals. You drift back to Atlas, floating quietly through space like a monk lost in prayer. You can't stop imagining that it's listening, that maybe these images of Mars weren't meant for us at all, that maybe Atlas has been trying to talk to something else all along and we just happened to eavesdrop. You think about the way it focused on Mars, how deliberate the angle was. Not just photography, surveillance, as if it was looking for signs of change, of movement, of life. Which is odd, given that Mars is widely considered a frozen, dusty, geologically depressed planet that hasn't sneezed in 1 billion years. Except, that might not be true anymore. Someone in Bangalore cross-checks the Atlas image timestamp with Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's activity logs and notices something strange. A thermal anomaly. Faint, but real. In the same region where the hexagonal blur appeared. A sudden spike in surface temperature, lasting only a few seconds, dismissed at the time as solar flare interference. But now, it looks a lot like something warmed up, briefly, and then went still again. Was it a sensor activating, a door opening? Historians, ever persistent, point out that in 1895, Giovanni Schiaparelli claimed to have seen a flicker of light near the Martian equator. A spark. He drew a tiny mark in the margin of his notebook next to the date. Later, he dismissed it as a reflection, or maybe a dream. Historians still argue whether that mark was the first modern recording of the Martian light, or just a slip of the pen. Fringe believers now unite under one banner, the awakening theory. They believe Atlas is part of a network, ancient, sprawling and long dormant. A communication relay designed not to observe us, but to check in on Mars, to see if its long silent sibling had stirred. Atlas, they say, is like a reminder, a cosmic knock on a very old door. The rest of the scientific world does its best to smile politely and carry on, and still, more data trickles in. 3 new observatories detect consistent echoing reflections in the same image frequencies, reflections from Atlas's surface that change depending on its proximity to Mars. That shouldn't happen unless something else is influencing it, something active. Which brings us to the most recent theory, one that no one wants to say out loud, but everyone's thinking. What if Atlas isn't just observing Mars? What if it's reporting to Mars? The implications are, frankly, dizzying. You stare at the slowly drifting object and imagine the possibilities. A relay that spans the stars. A memory system embedded in time. A check-in call from a species that left long before Earth cooled. And suddenly, you no longer feel like the center of the solar system. You feel like a kid who picked up someone else's phone and found unread messages from a number that shouldn't exist. You wake up, figuratively of course, since this is still the realm of sleepy science, but your mind has shifted. You're no longer drifting with awe through space. Now you're peering over your metaphorical shoulder, trying to understand why the universe suddenly feels so much more crowded. Atlas is out there, still moving, still silent, and still taking pictures, or transmitting them, or beaming them to Mars, depending on which theory you've decided to believe this week. And now you finally get to see what the rest of those images contain. The third transmission isn't announced by NASA. It's not shared in a press release or dropped in a Twitter thread by a scientist with too much coffee and not enough sleep. No, this one appears without warning. Uploaded anonymously, not from an observatory, from a private server in Norway, traced back to a glacier observatory station that hasn't been operational in over 10 years. But the file is real. Security experts verify the checksum. It's a perfect match to the previous Atlas data packets. No corruption, no compression, just raw, clean digital ice. And inside, a single image, still black and white, still crooked, still tinged with that strange stretched lens effect that makes you feel like you're falling sideways into the void. And in the centre, Mars. But wrong. At first glance, it looks like a classic Martian landscape, dunes, rock formations, low sweeping hills painted in pale grayscale. But the lighting doesn't match. The shadows are too sharp, the contrast too severe. As if there's a second light source, low and artificial, just outside the frame. You lean in, you squint, you adjust your screen's brightness. And that's when you see it. The angles. There are lines where there should be none, right angles, intersecting ridges, and a hexagonal pattern that runs across the sand like a watermark. It's subtle. You wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. But now that you are, it's everywhere. The texture of the ground is too consistent. Not natural sediment, not chaos, geometry. Some believe this is just image artifacting, a digital hiccup caused by interference, or possibly the weird properties of Atlas's imaging process. But others, especially those who analyse topographic structures for a living, know better. One researcher from Cambridge publishes a long-winded blog post suggesting that the repeating pattern matches what you'd expect from structured underlayment. That's a fancy term for pavement. So you're telling me you think that Mars has tiles now? Well, kind of. Geologists weigh in with a bit more caution. They say the region shown in the image, a remote zone near the Martian equator, is known for having unusually eroded surfaces. That polygonal ground isn't impossible. In fact, under rare conditions, freeze-thaw cycles in permafrost can produce shapes that look artificial, but those patterns are random, organic, not this clean, not this engineered. Historians, of course, waste no time. A professor in Istanbul digs out a 10th century manuscript describing a mirror-red land beyond the stars, where the earth is cut like stone tiles, and the sky waits without voice. No one knows where the text came from, but now it has thousands of views, and a surprisingly tasteful lo-fi remix on SoundCloud. Meanwhile, the fourth image drops. This time there's no ambiguity. You can see the edge of a cliff, flat-topped, with shadows that stretch out like claws, and perched near the base is an object. It's hard to scale. Mars has no trees, no birds, no signs of life to offer a reference point, but based on geological estimates, the object is roughly 2 meters wide, oval, smooth, and highly reflective. Reflective rock wouldn't be news, but this thing reflects directionally, not like metal, but like a mirror that knows where the light's coming from. You shiver. Because if it reflects like that, it isn't just passively bouncing photons, it's controlling their path. And that suggests design. So what are we seeing? Is it a natural formation? A relic? A satellite that fell out of orbit and landed with suspicious neatness? No one can say, but what they can say is this. That region of Mars, where the cliffside object appears, is one that's never been imaged at this resolution, not by our satellites, not by rovers, not by probes. Which begs the question, how does Atlas know about it? You pause here, float for a moment. Let that one settle into your bones like cosmic frost. How does it know? The answer some whisper and others shout is that it doesn't. At least not on its own. Maybe it's not choosing these sites. Maybe it's being guided. This is the point where the speculative physics people join the party. The kinds of scientists who write research papers titled Time Loops and the Ethics of Alien Relays. They suggest that Atlas may not be fully autonomous, that maybe it carries data from another system, like a black box recorder or a long-range telescope built to scan specific coordinates across dozens of planetary systems, and perhaps somewhere in its instructions, Mars was flagged for irregular geometry. Another theory, that Atlas is mapping remnants, ruins, not of life as we know it, but of processes, structures built not to house organisms but to store information, encrypted in stone, preserved under dust, a Martian hard drive waiting for the right reader to pass overhead, and Atlas apparently is that reader. One team of physicists notices that the intervals between Atlas's image drops form a pattern, not in time, but in orbital mechanics. Each release corresponds to a precise angular alignment between Mars, Atlas, and the Sun. You know what else uses that kind of alignment? Signal triangulation. In other words, Atlas is talking, not to Earth, not to itself, but maybe to Mars. You try to picture what that looks like, not in a sci-fi kind of way. No glowing beacons or ancient alien towers, just data. Light pulses, reflected shadows, coordinates, secrets passed across a dusty void. And still, no one has seen Atlas up close. No probe has caught up, no telescope has captured more than a blur. It's fast, too fast, and now it's speeding up, not wildly, not chaotically, but precisely accelerating as it exits Mars's orbital shadow, as if it's done here, as if the job is finished. Whatever needed to be seen has been, and now it's heading somewhere else. You stare at the new images, at the cliff, at the mirror, at the buried angles in the sand, and for the first time you wonder, not if Mars was alive once, but if it still is. Not biological life, necessarily, but processes, intentions, mechanisms older than memory waiting under a skin of dust for a visitor to look back. And 3i Atlas. Maybe it was never a visitor at all. Maybe it's a long-lost companion coming home to check on something left behind. You don't need anyone to tell you the images are wrong anymore. You just know. It's that subtle tension in your chest, the way your eyes keep getting drawn to corners of the frame that don't quite behave. Mars has always been the dusty, predictable older sibling in the planetary family, quiet, composed, photogenic in a washed-out kind of way, but now it's starting to look artificial. Not all at once, of course, that would be too kind. Instead, it creeps in frame by frame, pixel by pixel, in ways that don't immediately make sense. The sand seems smoother than it should be, the shadows fall wrong, and the more you study the newest Atlas image, the fifth one, dropped anonymously again through a Swiss climate monitoring station of all places, the more you realise the lighting isn't just sharp, it's inverted. Yes, inverted. The shadows in the image don't fall away from the apparent light source, they fall toward it, which shouldn't be possible. Not unless the surface itself is bending light. Not unless the cliffs and dunes and rocky ridges are acting as, lenses, prisms, something worse? You scroll through the forums, the science ones are no better than the conspiracy pits now. Someone's running ray tracing simulations through the Martian terrain shown in the Atlas frames. The results suggest reflective properties, facets in the rocks that don't occur in nature, not even in crystalline formations. We're talking about geometric alignment, clean reflection at odd angles, and, most importantly, internal consistency, like a mirror maze built underground and dusted over with red. The hypothesis being floated cautiously, quietly, is that the surface shown isn't just rock, it's fabricated material, designed to look like regolith, designed to scatter light, but it's failing. Age, erosion, time, who knows? The mask is slipping, and just like that, a whole new wave of questions rises like dust off a Martian wind. The term structural mirage gets tossed around. It's not a real term, not yet, but it spreads like wildfire. The idea is simple and horrifying. What if some regions of Mars were engineered not to hide structures, but to imitate nature so perfectly that you wouldn't know there was anything to find? A fringe geologist from Chile publishes a paper claiming that the area seen in the fifth image matches formations from the Gusev crater, but rotated. Flipped. The image appears mirrored along a vertical axis. He goes further and overlays Mars rover imagery with the Atlas shot. The match is eerie. The cliffside formation has an identical twin, almost down to the grain. That's not erosion. That's duplication. You float back in, imagining the scene from above, the topography repeating itself like a wallpaper glitch. Natural? Unlikely. Intentional? Probably. And the purpose, that's the worst part. You don't know, no one does. Historians begin to wade into deeper waters. One linguist points out that a recurring shape in the images, the six-pointed design embedded faintly into the regolith, appears similar to mandala patterns found in Tibetan Buddhist art. Now, this is likely coincidence. Symmetry has a habit of cropping up wherever humans seek meaning. But when someone overlays the image with satellite data from Mars Global Surveyor, and lines start to match up with surface anomalies mapped decades ago, the tension breaks the atmosphere. Even the skeptical scientists stop laughing. Back on Earth, observatories begin to coordinate with military radar systems, not because Atlas is a threat, not yet, but because its behaviour is starting to look intentional. As it passes out of Mars's orbital line, it doesn't just accelerate, it adjusts. Not a wild veer or a sudden boost, but a subtle pitch, almost like a spacecraft adjusting its trim. And that's when the strangest signal yet is received. It's not an image, not audio, not even data, not in the traditional sense. It's a shadow. No, not metaphorically. A literal distortion. detected not in space but on Mars itself. One of the older Mars orbiters, long written off as obsolete, registers a passing anomaly on its light sensor array. A blot. Not light, not matter, just absence, like a hand moved across a flashlight. The team managing the satellite reboots its imaging software, cross-checks, recalibrates. The anomaly doesn't repeat, but it happened, recorded, time-stamped, a 3-second interruption in surface reflection consistent with a large, fast-moving object casting a shadow from above the planet. Not an eclipse. Not atmospheric interference. A silhouette. You think of the blur, of the hexagonal shape. Maybe it was never hovering beside Mars, maybe it was above it all along. One researcher floats the possibility that the original Atlas images captured more than we realised, that the background blur wasn't behind Mars or even in the same frame, that it was part of a reflection, a mirror within a mirror, Mars looking at something above it, maybe something we can't see from Earth. The idea sticks. Forums light up with image analyses, enhancements, inversions, spectral overlays. You see the same jagged symmetry pop up again and again, too sharp for near, too dull for tech, something that doesn't quite belong to either. And now everyone starts asking the same question. Why Mars? Why not Jupiter with its dozens of moons and swirling, storm-choked skies? Why not Venus, which practically glows with radio heat? Why not Earth? The answer being whispered. Because Mars is quiet. Because it's cold and dry and unchanging. Because whatever's hidden there has been sown. You drift in again, watching Atlas shrink in the rear distance. The object, having apparently finished its business with Mars, is now veering toward the inner solar system, not straight for Earth, not yet, but on a path that could be a pursuit. You can't shake the feeling that Atlas isn't just a probe. It's a kind of courier. A cosmic drone dispatched from nowhere, scanning its ancient stops, checking for signs of movement. The planetary equivalent of knocking on old doors to see if anyone's home, and now it's turning away, which means whatever it came to see on Mars, it saw. The reflection anomalies. The unnatural shadows, the repeated surface geometry, all pointing toward one conclusion, that something under Mars is still awake, still reflecting light, still watching back. And if Atlas is now moving on, perhaps it's not leaving us behind. Perhaps it's reporting in. By now, you don't even pretend this is just a passing curiosity. The moment 3i Atlas sent that 5th image, you stopped checking news for entertainment and started checking it like it was weather. Like it was a storm you could feel rumbling far off, just over the Martian horizon. And now, another gust rolls in. Because in the 6th image, quietly released, buried on a page that doesn't even try to go viral, there's something new. A pale streak across a region that Mars maps had long labelled as dry. Bone dry, dead for millions of years. But the photo, raw and grainy as ever, tells a different story. It shows ice, and not just any ice. This isn't the thin, seasonal frost that forms around Mars' poles. This is thick, layered, deeply embedded into the ground like a vein running through the crust. In the image, it glows faintly under the harsh, directionless light that's now become Atlas's signature. The surface looks scraped, as if something heavy dragged across it, or maybe out of it. Planetary scientists respond like someone dumped cold coffee on their spreadsheets. The area captured, a narrow canyon system just south of Elysium Planitia, is one of the regions Mars rovers were never able to visit. Too remote, too risky, not quite interesting enough. But here it is, in Atlas's monochrome focus, and it's shimmering like a refrigerated scar. A glacial deposit here would be surprising enough, but what makes this truly impossible is the depth of the cut. Analysis of the image's light distortion suggests the ice goes down at least 40 meters. That's not a frost layer. That's a buried structure, a system, maybe a tunnel, maybe a reservoir, possibly both. And right at the edge, where the canyon flattens out and the ice meets rock, there's a curve. That's what draws your eyes back, over and over. The curve. Mars doesn't do curves well. Its geology is boxy, rugged, crumpled, but this shape is soft, sweeping, unnaturally smooth. You stare until your brain can't decide whether it's a hatch or a dome, or just a trick of lighting. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's everything. The data gets dumped to every available agency. ESA posts a statement so dry, you can practically hear the shrug behind it. NASA holds back, citing ongoing analysis. But a few whispers escape the room, not leaks, just tone. language that feels like velvet stretched over panic. One scientist, asked off the record what she thinks of the image, replies, "It looks like infrastructure." That word hits like a dropped wrench in a quiet room. Suddenly everyone wants to know, how old is this ice? Could it have formed recently? Is there any known activity nearby? Can we date it? Can we scan it? Can we drill into it? The answer: no, and absolutely not. Rovers are thousands of kilometres away. Satellites can't resolve detail at this angle. And Atlas, our reluctant, non-consensual Martian photographer, is already speeding off, like someone who delivered a package to the wrong house and doesn't want to stick around to explain. But we still have the photo, and the curve, and the ice. Theories explode. One suggests the ice was once part of a transportation network, kind of Martian subway system where glacial corridors cooled buried machines. Another posits that the curve is an entrance to a cryogenic vault, where biological samples from a forgotten civilization lie dormant, waiting for the right climate, or the right knock. And here's a new idea. Maybe Atlas didn't discover this. Maybe it activated it. What if the ice was dormant until something recognized Atlas's signal? What if that canyon had been sealed, invisible, until just now? Till that passing shadow drift overhead and the system beneath Mars responded? It's not just speculation anymore. Deep penetration radar from Mars orbiters has been rerun through new filters, and they're showing hints of anomalies beneath the surface. Grid patterns, lines that don't align with natural fault zones. The data's messy but consistent. Mars has structure under the skin. That structure might have opened up, and whatever is beneath it might still be aware. Historians dig deeper, because that's what they do. A scholar from Cairo uncovers a 4th century Egyptian parchment describing the stone lake on a red mountain where no beasts tread. It's not science, it's not evidence, but the metaphor cuts a little too close to feel like pure fiction. Historians still argue whether this counts as mythology or unconscious memory, but then again, no one really wants to argue anymore. Not about Mars. Now the conversation shifts. Not what is Atlas, but why now? Why, after billions of years of silence, does Mars flicker with glacial veins? Why does an interstellar object arrive just in time to photograph a canyon no probe has ever seen? Why does the shape of that canyon match a series of triangles buried in a C-3 Soviet orbital photo that was dismissed as an imaging glitch? Fringe theorists have a name for this moment: reactivation. They claim that Atlas is a courier sent to trigger old systems, that Mars is layered with sensors, buried devices programmed to listen, to wait, to sleep for geological eons until their signal came home. And maybe, just maybe, that signal was Atlas, which means Mars is listening again. And if Mars is listening, what happens when it answers? You drift through the thought like a shadow across the Martian ice. The canyon below flickers in your mind's eye. Cold, silent, geometric. You imagine standing at the edge of that buried curve, staring into blackness, hearing nothing but wind and your own breath. And then something changes. A hiss, a vibration. The ice shifts underfoot, and something beneath begins to stir. It's just a dream, of course, just a sleepy story, just science wrapped in darkness. And yet, you're still thinking about that curve in the ice, that smooth, unbroken arc buried in Martian frost like a small half lost in sand. No one knows what it is. No one can explain the geometry, the depth, the reflective signature. But that doesn't stop the data from spreading. Like spores on the wind, it's everywhere now. On academic servers, tucked inside encrypted folders passed between astrophysics departments, even leaked to a few choice Reddit threads that normally argue about telescope mounts and Star Trek canon. But it's the 7th image that freezes the conversation mid-sentence. This time, the transmission arrives through a deep space relay antenna in New Mexico, one usually reserved for tracking dying satellites and low-priority comet drift. The file is larger than previous ones, double the resolution. The compression signature is unfamiliar, some kind of logarithmic encoding that unspools like ribbon when processed correctly. And what it reveals makes the ice curve look quaint, because this time Atlas doesn't give you another surface shot of Mars. It gives you a blueprint. At least that's what it looks like. Laid out in thin, delicate lines over a faded background of Martian terrain is a perfect 6-pointed hexagon. Clean, sharp, unnervingly symmetrical, stitched into the frame like it was always there. The coordinates are tagged in the corner, 22.4 digir N, 137.1 digir E. A desolate plateau, nothing of interest. Until now, because at those exact coordinates, infrared imaging detects an anomalous heat signature, faint but steady. Not a flare, not residual sunlight bouncing off rock. No, this is internal heat. Something beneath the surface is generating energy. You're not sure what's worse, the idea that it's alive or the idea that it's powered. Engineers at JPL run the blueprint through structural analysis software. The hexagon isn't just a shape, it's a design. Pressure-bearing joints, reinforced layers, possible chamber intersections. It mirrors human-made infrastructure almost too well. A few whisper it looks like a data vault. The kind used in Earth-based bunkers to protect digital memory from war, fire and time. So what's under there? A library, a server, a tomb? You're not the only one asking. ESA sends a formal request to repoint the Mars Express orbiter. The request is denied, not due to risk, but because the probe's current orbital trajectory puts it out of sync with the location for at least 17 days. NASA's MAVEN orbiter could swing by sooner, but it's already stretched to the edge of its operational budget. So the only eyes that seem to know how to look in the right place are Atlas's. And Atlas, as usual, isn't talking. It's just sending. The new image, dubbed Blueprint 7 by the press, triggers debates that can't be contained. Not anymore. Scientists, linguists, military analysts, even philosophers are now involved. Some suggest that the hexagonal structure is part of a planetary machine, something ancient and planetary scale. A few go further. What if Mars was never a planet in the traditional sense, but a shell, a container, a vessel, and something inside has started to leak? Because that thermal signature? It's rising very slowly, but undeniably. You feel the air thin in your imagination, as if Mars's own frail atmosphere is holding its breath. And then someone notices a pattern. Across the 7 images Atlas has sent so far, there are recurring elements, not just coordinates or structures, but shadows. Not in the casual cast-by-rock way, but placed deliberate. They appear in the same general area of each image, always in the background, always at the edge of the frame. When isolated and overlaid, the shadows form a kind of circular progression. Not just movement, but rotation. Think of clock hands, but not 12 hours, 6 steps, 6 positions, a sequence. Historians dig through ancient calendars, because of course they do. One Italian researcher finds a Babylonian star chart showing Mars at 6 positions over a 600-day cycle. Coincidence? Maybe. But when the same cycle shows up in a Mayan glyph etched on a carved obsidian disc, well, historians still argue whether it's shared knowledge or collective paranoia. But the 6th position, the final image in the Atlas sequence, lines up perfectly with the latest coordinates. So naturally, the internet names it the key. People say the hexagon is a door, the curve is a hinge, the ice is camouflage, and Atlas is the key. What if this whole thing, these transmissions, these images, is part of an ancient reactivation protocol? Something that can only be unlocked when all 6 positions are confirmed, triangulated, aligned? And now they are, which means Mars isn't just hiding something, it's about to open. That theory gains traction in less reputable circles, of course, but it also finds quiet allies in official places. One planetary scientist goes rogue during a late-night livestream and shares a classified image from a deep penetration radar scan taken last month. It shows vertical shafts beneath the Blueprint 7 coordinates, multiple levels, cavernous. The feed is cut mid-sentence. The image circulates anyway. You still drifting can almost picture it. A vast chamber buried beneath Martian dust, perfectly preserved, waiting for an ancient message from a courier made of light, rock, and impossible sensors. You imagine standing above that hatch, staring down into blackness, wondering if you're at the top of a staircase or the edge of a throat. And now, here's the kicker. Atlas slows down, just briefly, a fractional change in velocity, barely detectable, but it's there, confirmed by no less than 4 tracking stations, the first real deviation from its trajectory since its appearance. It's not random, it's not gravitational, it's intentional, which means Atlas is aware of something. Maybe us, maybe Mars, maybe the signal it's waiting for just fired back, and maybe, just maybe, the key isn't Atlas itself. Maybe it's the images, maybe sending them wasn't a report, maybe it was a code, a trigger, And now, whatever it was meant to unlock is listening. You don't realise how much you've changed until you catch yourself staring at a live atlas tracker before brushing your teeth. It's just a dot on a screen, moving pixel by pixel across a solar system that suddenly feels too small, but it's become your lodestar, your scullant obsession. You've watched it slingshot past Mars, drop 7 cryptic reality-bending images into our collective lap, and now it's accelerating. Again. But not in the way a rock does when flung by gravity. This is different. Controlled. Timed, almost polite. And then the 8th transmission arrives. Only this time it's not a picture. It's sound, sort of. It comes as a data packet, scrambled and coded in a frequency band usually reserved for deep space background noise. At first, it seemed like another corrupted signal, but a graduate student in Japan, half awake and running Atlas data through a modified sonification algorithm, plays it through a synthesizer. And what comes out is a series of rhythmic pulses, low, droning and oddly melodic. Not music, but not static either. It's a kind of breath. 4-second hums, each followed by a sharp click like sonar. Then silence. Then it repeats. You listen to it with your headphones on, the hum bleeding into your chest like fog. It's the kind of sound that's easy to ignore until it's not, until it becomes part of your environment, like the buzz of a refrigerator or the hum of streetlights. But once you tune into it, once it has your attention, it won't let go. And here's where things go sideways, because someone, somewhere, plays the sound back toward Mars, just to see what happens. It's not an official act, not a coordinated experiment, just a rogue transmission from a private array in South Africa, a former SETI station, reactivated by a group of very curious engineers with too much time and too few rules. They align the array with the coordinates from Atlas's last image, push the synthesized sound through a directional transmitter, and aim it straight at Blueprint 7's hexagon. 3 days later, Mars responds, not with noise, not with a signal, with movement. One of NASA's aging orbital satellites, passed over in most of the recent data scrambles, picks up a surface-level thermal flare. Faint, momentary, but exactly at the coordinates of the hexagon. The temperature rises by 3.4 degrees Celsius across a 10-meter radius, then stabilizes. Mars blinked, and now everyone is fully, irreversibly awake. Engineers reroute high-resolution imaging satellites. Deep radar scans are reactivated. The Curiosity and Perseverance rovers, nowhere near the site, are updated with new movement protocols just in case. But the real shock comes from what the thermal scan reveals next. Beneath the ice curve, remember that arc you saw a few transmissions ago? There's now a gap. A narrow slit. Like something shifted just slightly. Like a door almost cracked open. Radar confirms it. An internal cavity that didn't exist before. Or maybe one that was never detectable until now. Which means something inside Mars heard the sound, heard Atlas, and responded. You imagine what could be inside, not bones, not fossils, something better. Or worse, a dormant network, a memory vault, a machine older than language. Or maybe not even a machine, maybe just an idea frozen in geometry, encoded in stone and still listening, waiting for the right key to play the right tone. One that Atlas delivered like a tuning fork dropped into deep silence. Historians, philosophers, theologians, everyone now finds a seat at the table. One medievalist points out that Gregorian chants, when slowed down and reversed, share structural similarities with the Atlas pulse pattern. It's nonsense, probably, but probably doesn't mean much anymore. Another academic digs up a Navajo myth about a breathing stone beneath the red earth. He's dismissed, politely. Then someone overlays the myth symbols on the hexagon design from Blueprint 7, and something matches. Again, historians still argue whether we're connecting dots that were never meant to form a picture, or whether the picture is older than dots. Meanwhile, 3i Atlas begins to drift out of Mars' gravitational influence. But instead of continuing its expected trajectory toward the asteroid belt, it changes course. Not drastically, just enough to matter. Just enough to put it on a slow, subtle arc toward Earth. Cue panic. Only it's not called panic. In official memos, it's strategic concern. In interviews, it's monitoring. But behind closed doors, the people paid to worry for a living are starting to sweat through their suits. Because if Atlas has the ability to photograph planets, interpret terrain, detect structures, and now, apparently, emits sound signals that trigger dormant Martian systems. What happens when it decides to aim those capabilities at Earth? Some want to send a probe, others want to fire a signal, either in greeting or warning. A few very quiet voices in the military sector ask what it would take to intercept Atlas. Spoiler, we can't. Even now it's travelling too fast, too far, too cleverly. Because you see, Atlas doesn't fly like a comet. It doesn't tumble or spiral or wobble. It slides, smooth and efficient, like it knows exactly where it's going, like it remembers the route. And that's the theory gaining momentum now, that Atlas isn't just visiting planets, it's revisiting them. Its trajectory, plotted backwards, doesn't just intersect Mars, it grazes past Earth. Not close, but close enough. Close enough that around 12,000 years ago, if it had passed through, it might have been visible in the night sky. Just a strange moving star. Something a few early humans might have seen and carved into stone, just once. One archaeologist pulls up a petroglyph from Turkey, a six-pointed shape with a trail behind it etched into limestone. Nearby, a cluster of dots. A crude version of Mars. Or maybe Earth. Historians still argue which. But maybe Atlas has been here before. Maybe it left, watched from afar, and only now is returning to check the signal. To see if any of the old systems, Martian, human or otherwise, are still functional. And when it passed Mars, they were. So what about Earth? What dormant codes lie buried beneath our own surface? What old machines still whisper in the frequencies between science and myth? What shadows move in our corners, unseen and waiting for the knock? You float, weightless, as the hum echoes in your mind. Atlas is coming, and the planet beneath your feet? It might not be as quiet as you think. By now, you're not just following Atlas, you're anticipating it. You check its position more than you check the time. Its projected arc curves inward, ever so slightly, bending across the black like a question mark with no punctuation. It's no longer a matter of where Atlas is, but what it's heading toward. And the moment it began that slow, deliberate arc toward Earth, something shifted. Not in space, but in us. People are tense, not loud panic tense, quiet panic. The kind that lives in fingertips and eyes that dart to the sky without realizing. News anchors joke about it. Researchers dodge questions, but beneath the surface there's a global tightening of breath. Because 3i Atlas, this object that took pictures without a camera, hummed like a heartbeat, and triggered motion beneath the Martian ice, has changed its trajectory. Not with thrusters, not with gravity. It's simply decided, and now it's headed here. Which brings us to the part of the story no one wants to talk about. The part where the people in charge, the ones with keys and clearances, begin to ask if Atlas is a threat. A coalition of space monitoring agencies forms overnight. Not public, not press conference official, just a sudden collaboration between NASA, ESA, CNSA, and a few smaller agencies who get the nod when things are too weird for protocol. They call it Project Sentinel. Its goal? Track Atlas, predict its movements, and to quietly prepare for what happens if it turns out to be more than a messenger. Meanwhile, down in the depths of the internet, another theory blooms like mold in a damp basement. They call it the Echo Hypothesis. It goes like this. Atlas is not an explorer. It's a repeater, a relay, a cosmic backup drive. What it's doing now, sending images, emitting signals, curving toward planetary bodies, is part of a pre-written loop. A sequence designed not to analyze, but to report. And not to us, to someone else. Think about it. The images aren't random. Mars, the ice, the structure, the hexagon, each one a step in a process, a checklist. Atlas passed by Mars, scanned it, transmitted the information. Now it's heading toward Earth. Not for contact, for confirmation. You're not the only one thinking this. Linguists begin decoding the rhythmic pulses of Atlas's last signal, the one turned into that eerie hum. When mapped into frequency graphs, the pulse sequence mirrors known binary structures, not quite digital, more like compressed logic patterns, what you might expect if you wanted to summarize planetary data into an ultra-compact message. The hum, it seems, is a kind of signature, not of Atlas itself, but of what it observes, a planetary status report. Mars hummed back. So what will Earth do? The question haunts mission control rooms across the world. There are debates, endless ones, about whether to respond, whether to send a reply signal the way that rogue South African array did. Some argue that our not responding is safer, that silence is our shield. Others say the opposite, that staying silent makes us a non-participant in whatever game Atlas is playing. And no one wants to be left out of the galactic group chat. But something unexpected shifts the conversation. Because Atlas sends another file, the 9th transmission. Not an image, not a sound, a map, not of Mars, not of space, of Earth, specifically the Pacific Ocean. At first, it's dismissed. The coordinates don't align with any known facility, fault line, or magnetic anomaly. Just a patch of open water south of the equator, near a region sometimes called the oceanic pole of inaccessibility, Point Nemo. The loneliest place on Earth, the spot furthest from any landmass, a place so remote that even satellites struggle to watch it. And that's exactly where Atlas is aiming. Panic now becomes more than a mood. It's a spreadsheet, a protocol, a live feed of meetings with words like aerospace denial strategy and orbital contingency. Not that it helps, because Atlas doesn't enter Earth's atmosphere. It doesn't dip low or burn through like a meteor. It just continues gliding, smooth, controlled, as if it's already been here and knows where to go. More analysis of the map shows something chilling. The trajectory drawn, one long arc traced over the Pacific, matches an orbit from roughly 12,500 years ago, when Earth's axial tilt and precession would have put Point Nemo directly aligned with a now-lost star cluster that vanished behind interstellar dust. Historians point to the Younger Dryas event, when Earth underwent a sudden, severe climate shift at the end of the Ice Age. Some say it was a comet, others say a volcanic eruption, but now, a few wonder, what if it was caused, not intentionally, not maliciously, just triggered, by a visitor like Atlas, a cosmic reset button? Suddenly, older myths take on new colour. Flood stories, skyships, the Watchers, the firmament splitting open. Scholars once laughed. Now they stare at seismograph data from Point Nemo showing a deep, rhythmic vibration. Not tectonic, not volcanic, a slow pulsing, detected only once the same day Atlas changed course. Historians still argue whether these vibrations were coincidence or signal, but they agree on one thing: something is echoing back. So you sit there imagining the deepest part of the ocean and miles of black pressure pressing down on something ancient and silent, not alive, not dead, just waiting. You imagine a stone, or a vault, or a machine that hasn't moved since before humans learned to cook food. And now, with a hum and a whisper from a visitor made of frozen memory, it hears the code and begins to warm. Some people talk about sending subs, others suggest nukes, but most just wait. Because there's a creeping realization spreading now, not fear, not wonder, but a kind of recognition. Like we've been here before. Like Earth too is part of this loop, a receiver, a relay, a sleeping system in a long-forgotten machine. Reawakening because someone knocked in just the right way. And Atlas? Atlas is just the courier. The key we left floating in space and forgot we had. Until now. By now you've stopped checking Atlas's position every hour. You don't need to. You can feel where it is, not in the physical sense, nothing so convenient. It's more like a pressure at the base of your skull, or that old childhood sense that someone's watching you from the dark just beyond the edge of your bed. Atlas has become part of your awareness, part of everyone's awareness. It's a presence now, not a point of data. Something ancient that's just a little too quiet and a little too deliberate for anyone to pretend this is still a comet story. Especially now that movement has been detected on Mars. You remember that ice curve, right? The one everyone kept analysing pixel by pixel until it became less a natural ridge and more a maybe door. Well, someone finally reprocessed the raw thermal scans from the day of the Atlas sound transmission. This time using an algorithm not designed for topography, but for monitoring industrial heat flow. The result? A temperature pattern that mimics what you'd see from an energy system powering up in sequential stages, like a machine booting. 4 days later, an ultra-high-resolution image from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter picks up something that makes your stomach drop through the floor of whatever spaceship your imagination's been floating in. A hexagon. No longer just implied, no longer buried in ice, no longer hidden in structure. This one is clean, geometric, raised, a perfect six-sided shape measuring roughly 80 meters across, now protrudes ever so slightly above the Martian surface in the exact coordinates of the Blueprint 7 image Atlas sent earlier. Mars has opened something, or exposed something, or woken something up. We don't know which, and honestly, the words are starting to blur, because over on Earth, strange echoes are beginning to surface. The data coming from Point Nemo, where Atlas has aimed its next flyby, keeps piling up with no clear explanation. Deep-sea hydrophones installed decades ago for monitoring submarine activity pick up pulses, not natural seismic noise, not animal communication, but patterned sound, rhythmic, familiar. It matches the Atlas hum. The same 4-second breath, click, pause, only now it's coming from below. You'd think this would be enough to trigger a global alarm, but surprisingly, or perhaps predictably, it doesn't. It's all cloaked in quiet memos, closed-door meetings, and anomalous but non-threatening reports, because no one wants to admit that the ocean might be talking back, but others know. In fact, it seems someone has known for a long time. A series of documents, declassified in a very suspiciously timed leak, reveal that Point Nemo has been monitored since the late 1970s under an old Cold War project codenamed Driftlock. The goal? Track sub-oceanic acoustic anomalies of unknown origin. One document references a 1982 event where a deep tone matching Atlas's now familiar frequency pattern was recorded. The report concludes with a phrase that, if it weren't typed in blocky government font, might read like poetry. Resonance prests, the lock holds, awaiting the key. You already know what that means, don't you? Atlas is the key. The object, the gear, the sound, the hum, the trajectory, it's all part of an unlocking sequence. And whatever it's unlocking, it's not limited to Mars. Earth is next. Not because Atlas wants it to be, not because we're being invaded, but because we're part of the system. Part of a design so old that we forgot we were ever connected to it, until something drifted back and sang the opening note. Here's where things get truly strange. Scientists start reviewing Earth's geomagnetic history, not just recent shifts, but deep core reversals, magnetic anomalies, things buried in ice core samples and fossil records. Patterns emerge. Every 12,000 to 13,000 years, there's a brief pulse in the data. A change, something shifts, something resonates, no cataclysm, no extinction level event, but an echo, a tone, a reset, and now one of those pulses is beginning again. All of this would be easier to dismiss if not for the latest image drop from Atlas. The 10th transmission. It's not Earth. Not quite. It's what Earth looked like from Atlas's perspective, 12,500 years ago. The image is a reconstruction. Not in colour, not perfect, but it shows the Pacific, unobstructed by modern coastlines, the continents in slightly different positions, a lower sea level, a stark, clear view of the oceanic ridge beneath Point Nemo, sharp, not silt-covered, and there, nestled in the ridge, a structure, not a ship, not a building, something else, massive, angular, geometric, only partially visible, but enough to send every serious geologist into silent paralysis. No known plate movement could create those angles. No underwater volcano could deposit stone in such perfect symmetry. It doesn't belong. And the timestamps on the image, yes, Atlas has been embedding metadata all along, match projections for Earth's axial orientation from over some millennia ago, which means the image was either captured back then or Atlas is capable of reconstructing planetary history with a degree of precision that borders on divine. You sit with that for a moment. Atlas has been watching, and not just now, not just Mars, all of us. This isn't reconnaissance, it's follow-up. Whatever process began with Atlas's first image has been moving forward with calm, unstoppable certainty. Mars was phase 1, Earth is phase 2. What comes next? We don't know, but here's the detail that pushes everything into a new orbit of fear. The Atlas image from above Earth, the ancient one, contains a second structure, fainter, blurred, a familiar six-sided shape hovering just above the Pacific, faint enough to miss. But once enhanced, it's unmistakable. The hexagon, again, floating, like it's always been there. Or maybe, like it's coming back. You wake up one morning and realise the sky feels different. Not darker, not louder. Just watched. It's not paranoia, exactly. More like the sensation of walking into a room and sensing someone's just left. The air still remembers them, and now Earth does too. Because Atlas has begun broadcasting continuously. Not to us. At least not intentionally. Its transmissions hum through the electromagnetic spectrum like whispered math, bouncing off ionospheres and bleeding into deep-sea monitors, like a ghost trying to remember the shape of a door it once walked through. And somewhere far beneath the Pacific, the resonance is being answered. Hydrophones near Point Nemo record sustained tonal pulses every 13 hours, layered with harmonics that don't match any known biological or geological source. The sound seems to rise from within the crust itself, deep rhythmic vibrations too low to hear, but strong enough to cause interference in satellite altimeters. It's as if something under Earth is humming along, and here's where it gets hard to dismiss, because for the first time since this began, something breaks the surface. October 4th, just after midnight UTC, a European weather satellite watching an otherwise unremarkable stretch of the Pacific catches something odd, a shimmer, brief, small, like a bubble rising through blackness, breaking tension. It appears for only 5 seconds before disappearing beneath the waves. The image, fuzzy infrared and very real, shows what appears to be a hexagonal lens breaching the water, metallic, smooth and moving up, but it's quickly dismissed in official channels as volcanic gas disturbance. But the footage leaks, naturally. A copy finds its way onto obscure forums, where amateur analysts run light refraction simulations and confirm the worst suspicion. The object wasn't just surfacing, it was transmitting. Back to Atlas. Somehow Earth has responded, and Atlas, still drifting calmly along its impossible arc, changes speed once more. Another course correction, another adjustment that shouldn't be possible for a rock, unless it's not a rock at all. It curves lower now, not toward collision, not yet, but close enough to enter high atmospheric range within 2 weeks. People begin preparing, not publicly, not in streets or schools, but in government offices, observatory basements, radio dishes hidden in Antarctic plains. There's a universal understanding among the people who watch the sky for a living. Atlas is coming home, because that's what it feels like now, isn't it? Not an arrival, a return. Historians dig deeper than ever. One obscure translation from a Sumerian tablet surfaces online, showing a 6-pointed sky stone that fell from the stars and whispered songs into the ocean. Another Babylonian carving, previously dismissed as astronomical allegory, depicts Earth surrounded by 6 lenses, each radiating lines toward the planet. Interpretations vary wildly, but the symbols match. The shape, the hum, the timing. One archaeologist, handshaking during a podcast, simply says, "We've seen this before, we just didn't know how to read it." Meanwhile on Mars, the hexagon is no longer dormant. New imaging shows that the raised platform is now fully unfolded into a geometric aperture, its centre sinking inward like an opened iris. The shape, so similar to the newly surfaced lens in Earth's ocean, hints at an architecture no one understands, not mechanical, not biological, something in between. Theories pour in like rain. Stargates, data ports, ancient AI. One bold physicist describes it as a planetary modem, a place where celestial objects, not just planets but systems, upload their history to the cosmos. And Atlas? Atlas is just the external drive, the retrieval mechanism, the thing that flies by and picks up what we've hidden, encrypted, buried deep beneath rock and myth. What's more chilling is that, according to fresh projections, Atlas has flown through at least 4 other star systems in its trajectory. All of them show similar planetary alignments, similar masses, similar rotational symmetries. It's like Atlas is running down a checklist across the stars, pinging old devices like a ghost updating its address book. And now it's here, and Earth has answered. You try not to dwell on what that means. You try to tell yourself this is just science doing what science does, reaching, observing, extrapolating. But deep down you feel it, like the tremor before a storm, because the 11th transmission arrives. Not an image, not a hum, a pattern. It looks like static at first. Black and white lines, vertical columns, occasional breaks. But someone runs it through a musical encoder, one designed to visualize Gregorian chant, and it transforms, not into music, into instruction. The pattern maps precisely onto a set of coordinates across the Pacific, not a point. A grid, an area roughly the size of Rhode Island, and the grid shows lines, depth, access points, internal movement. There's even a legend of sorts. Symbols arranged in a 6-fold path that converges on a central hub. It's a layout, Earth's mirror to Mars's hexagon, a second iris, a second system, waiting. And here comes the part that turns scientific wonder into quiet terror. The symbols, translated loosely by linguists using a mix of ancient scripts and modern pattern theory, align with one haunting phrase: memory not yet recovered, not locked, not sealed, not yet recovered, which implies that it's coming, that Atlas isn't just here to take data and fly on, it's here to awaken something, or someone, or us. Because if Earth has this structure, if we've had it all along, sunk beneath the waves and stories and shifting plates, then maybe we were never just the observers. Maybe we were the experiment, or the carriers, or the message itself. And now, with Atlas's arrival just days away, with Earth's iris beginning to hum and shift beneath the ocean, the question is no longer, what is Atlas? The question is, what happens when we remember? You thought the strangeness had peaked, that nothing could escalate past ancient hexagons and humming oceans and sky rocks rewriting planetary history. But then you see the 11th image, and everything shifts again, not with a crash, but with a soft, precise click, like the last tumbler falling into place inside a lock that was never supposed to be opened. It arrives just past midnight, delivered through a deep space relay off the coast of Iceland. The connection is clean, the file intact, no anomalies, no corrupted frames. This time the image isn't of Mars, it isn't Earth. It's something between. A wide-angle capture showing both planets from Atlas's current perspective, each one lit just slightly off-center by the sun, side by side, like siblings, or test sites, or mirrors. But that's not the disturbing part. What draws your eyes, what makes you go still, blinking at the screen like you've forgotten how light works, is the thin, faint line connecting the two planets. You zoom in, enhance. It's not a line, not in the physical sense. It's more like a trail, a path, a thread of particulate light twisting through the void between Mars and Earth like a whisper left behind. At first, you think it might be a camera glitch, an optical stretch or the cosmic ray smear. But spectral analysis comes back fast, it's real. A thread of high-energy particles suspended in vacuum defying entropy. Somehow a tether exists between the two worlds. And even worse, it's recent, new. It wasn't there in earlier images. It began forming just after Earth echoed Atlas's hum back through Point Nemo. As though that sound, that breath, had activated a bridge, a connection. Physicists don't like it. You can tell by the way they start speaking in longer sentences and avoid eye contact during interviews. The leading explanation is a quantum filament, something Atlas could have emitted deliberately, maybe as a communications link. One that bonds its planetary access points like nodes in a network. They say it without saying it. Mars and Earth are now connected. For the first time in known history, two planets have formed a shared system. And what system would that be? Here's where the ancient theories creep in again, those dusty, half-laughed-out ideas from fringe archaeologists and forgotten linguists. The planetary network theory. It posits that certain celestial bodies, particularly terrestrial planets, were seeded long ago with embedded architecture, that beneath their crusts, wrapped in memory stone and frequency lock lattices, lie devices, not designed to build or destroy, but to store, to hold on to something too large for any one world to contain. Some called them cosmic libraries. Others believed they were living minds, distributed across planets like neurons in a brain too vast to imagine. And now, two of those nodes are online, because the 11th image also includes a time code. Atlas always timestamps its transmissions, but this one is different. It contains a countdown, faint, tucked deep in the metadata, but it's there, a 72-hour countdown from the moment the image arrived, and no one knows what happens at 0. NASA holds an emergency press conference and says almost nothing. The UN Security Council enters closed session. Radio silence follows. You're not surprised, but you are unsettled. Because somewhere in that stillness, beneath the bureaucratic hand-wringing and broadcast delays, the rest of the world has started to notice something else. People are dreaming again, not just dreams, shared dreams. Stories from scattered corners of the globe begin lining up, recurring symbols, consistent architecture. A hallway lined in red stone, a door marked with a 6-pointed star, a humming sound behind it, faint and low. Some describe it as a voice, others a vibration, but the details are too consistent to ignore. A woman in Sao Paulo sketches the same structure seen in Blueprint 7. A man in Cairo describes the ice curve under Mars, with dimensions matching radar data he's never seen. A child in rural Canada draws Atlas, unprompted and writes underneath, "I remember it." The pattern grows, not mass hysteria, something deeper, collective resonance, as if the activation of this planetary system is awakening something embedded not just in Earth's crust, but in our minds. Anthropologists are quietly losing their grip. One open-source study shows that certain ancient myths, once believed to be unconnected, share matching cadence when translated into numerical pulse sequences. When played through sonification software, the myths generate harmonic tones that align with the Atlas hum. It's like the stories weren't just stories, they were backups. Encoded memory fragments left in culture, in song, in stone, waiting like us. The countdown ticks. 3 days, then 2, then 1, and still no one knows what Atlas is going to do. Some believe it's a key, others a test, but the boldest theory, the one whispered by a quantum anthropologist in a blurred video interview, is this. Atlas is an anchor, not for ships, not for probes, for consciousness. His voice shakes when he says it. It's a retrieval protocol, he murmurs. It's not looking for life. It's looking for what life remembers. And when enough of us remember, the system will complete. You feel it now, don't you? The subtle pulse in your spine, the dream just beyond language, the memory you were never taught but always carried. You don't know what happens when the countdown ends, but you know it won't be a sound, or a flash, or a burst of light. It will be quiet, like a sigh, like a switch flipping in the dark, like the feeling you get when you walk into a place for the first time and somehow know exactly where everything is. The final 12 seconds are silent. You watch the countdown on the edge of your screen, a thin string of numbers fading from red to white with each passing beat. No alarms, no global broadcasts, no doomsday sirens, just a collective breath, held so tightly that it starts to ache in your ribs. All around the world, people are tuned in, not officially, not on some grand unified network, just quietly, privately, 100 million open tabs, cracked phone screens, terminal windows and blinking monitors, all locked on the same clock. Atlas hovers in the upper thermosphere now, too fast to track with the naked eye, too slow to crash. It sits there like a held note, no flame, no rattle, just poised, waiting, and then 0. Nothing happens. Not at first, just a clean digital reset. 0 uncle. Then 5 seconds later, every radio telescope on Earth registers the same signal, a tone. Low, subaudible, structured. And 30 seconds after that, the sky shifts. No, not literally, not the clouds, not the stars. Oh. You feel it first in your ears, a soft buzz, not unlike when an airplane cabin equalizes pressure. Then comes the light, not blinding, not explosive, but an impossible shimmer across the upper atmosphere. For a brief moment, the sky looks crystalline, like a pane of stained glass held above the world. Refractions ripple across the horizon in slow, pulsing bands, purples, greens, soft electric blues. People step outside and look up, not in fear, but with a quiet, aching awe. Somewhere in Kenya, a boy says it looks like the inside of a song. A woman in Tokyo drops to her knees and begins to hum. A prisoner in Sao Paulo reaches through the bars of his cell and starts whispering words in a language no one recognizes, but it feels familiar. Then somewhere over the Pacific, the ocean begins to glow. It starts at Point Nemo, just as expected. A soft circle of bioluminescent light that grows with each passing minute. Satellites show it pulsing, not randomly, but in rhythm with the Atlas hum, in 6-beat cycles, over and over, like a beacon blinking through black water. Then the pattern returns. Across the globe, electromagnetic interference begins to form structured shapes on sensors. Perfect hexagons, pulsing, rotating. They show up in magnetometers, in seismographs, even in static-ridden FM bands. You scan across frequencies and find them everywhere. It's like the planet is being tuned. And then finally, Atlas moves. But not away. It splits, a clean separation, quiet and precise. Atlas fractures along one of its natural ridges, something you always assumed was a crease or shadow, and 2 perfect halves drift apart. Between them, something flickers into view. A light. No shape, no mass, just a tear in the sky. A bright thread of motion that extends downward, like a string dipped into a still pond. It connects to Earth, to the Pacific, and the ocean responds. From beneath the waves, something rises. Slowly, gracefully, like it's not emerging so much as unfolding. The satellites catch it first, a vast geometric shape cresting just below the surface, then piercing it. And you recognize it, the hexagon, the same shape seen on Mars, the same symbol embedded in ancient texts in the sky map from Atlas's image sequence. But here, now, on Earth, it's not carved in stone, it's alive. It rotates, locks into place, and then somehow begins to project. Not light, not sound, memory. People around the world begin to see things, not hallucinations, not dreams, visions, layered onto the world like an augmented reality you didn't ask for but already knew how to interpret. You see an endless corridor carved in obsidian, lined with glowing veins that pulse like breath. You see stars arranged in a pattern you can't name but somehow understand, a map, a history, a path. You see other worlds, not Earth, not Mars, places that might have been, places that still are, places that failed. You realize now that this isn't about communication, it's about recovery. Atlas was never here to warn us, never here to ask permission. It was here to restore this planet, this species, our memories, our myths, our instincts. They're not separate. They're part of the system. Pieces of an architecture older than time as we count it. And the hexagon, it's a reader. A mechanism built to interface with the biological archive stored in every living cell, every dream, every instinctual whisper we've ever ignored. It's downloading us. Or maybe we're uploading ourselves. The signal deepens. A second tone emerges. This one is different, brighter. It resonates in your chest, makes your vision swim. And as it spreads, people begin to speak. Not in English, not in Mandarin. In something else. Words that taste like static and stars and oceans held in breath. The language of memory, of echo. And just before your own voice joins in, you remember something. Not a dream, not a life, a place, a vast world with twin moons, a red sky, a tower made of translucent stone. It wasn't Earth, but it was yours. You lived there, you lost it. You were sent here to forget. And now, you remember, you sit completely still, and not because you're scared, not anymore. The fear passed somewhere between the countdown and that first flash of sky. Now what you feel is recognition, the kind that sits just behind your heartbeat. The kind that makes your skin buzz when you step into a room and realize you've been there before, just not in this life. The air around you feels charged, like summer lightning, hot, dry but never striking. Atlas hasn't vanished. It hasn't fled back into the stars or exploded in a fireball of finality. It's still there, parked in orbit, silent as ever. But now its role is clear. It's not a visitor, not a threat. Not even a machine in the way we define machines. It's more like a seed, a device placed into motion eons ago, waiting for the right alignment, the right response, the right version of us to be ready. And somehow, we are. All across the globe, the visions continue. They're not hallucinations or dreams. They don't come in sleep or trance. They're overlays, memories threaded through your current senses, as real as the chair beneath you, layered over the world like heat waves above asphalt. You can still see your room, the street, the sky. But now, you also see something else. Another world. Some see vast, domed cities beneath red-tinged skies. Others glimpse great towers floating above oceans that shimmer with violet haze. You see people, not human, not quite, but familiar. And when they look at you, they smile like they know you, like they missed you. Some of them have your face or a version of it. Different body, same eyes. They are not the past, they are not ancestors, they are you. And then it clicks. What Atlas is doing, what it's always done, isn't just collecting data. It's restoring memory, identity, connection. Not between people, but across selves, across timelines, across worlds. The Earth wasn't just a cradle for life, it was a recovery point, a node in a galactic archive system that stores beings not just in flesh but in frequency. And once the correct trigger is activated, once the key aligns with the lock, the system opens. That key was the hum, the hexagon. The moment Earth's node and Mars's node both went live, and now it's spreading. An observatory in Argentina records the same resonance appearing faintly from Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The icy crust emits soft pulses, low, rhythmic, familiar. Another system coming online, another lock turned. NASA quietly confirms the anomaly but refuses to speculate. A probe headed towards Saturn's moon Enceladus begins to receive phantom data, bursts of signal that don't match any known transmission protocol. The patterns match those found within Atlas's first image of Mars. The conclusion is unavoidable. Atlas isn't just here to activate Earth, it's reigniting the whole system, and we're not the first. Historians, now working alongside quantum physicists in candlelit university basements, piece together ancient myths that speak of celestial siblings, twin worlds torn apart, a lost voice in the sky. A Sumerian tablet describes a map that sings, buried beneath water, waiting for the sky stone's shadow. They weren't metaphors, they were instructions, and something left them here for us. And now, more proof. The latest data drop from Atlas doesn't include images or audio. This time, it sends coordinates, a chain of global points traced around Earth's surface in 6 repeating spirals. Stone circles, mountain ranges, cave paintings, each one positioned precisely along magnetic fault lines, each one vibrating faintly with the new planetary resonance. It's not just memory being restored, it's architecture. A framework of energy points across the world hidden for thousands of years, pulsing back to life, not to transmit data, to transmit you. Because that's the real revelation. This isn't about unlocking a planet, it's about unlocking a species. The memories aren't stored in the hexagons or the oceans or the towers in the sky. They're stored in us, encoded in DNA, buried in subconscious strata, wrapped in instinct and dream and gut feelings we never could explain. Atlas is simply the activator, the match to the fuel. And now, it's lit. Every day more people awaken, not all at once, some in flashes, some through dreams, some during the most mundane moments, watering a plant, brushing teeth, crossing the street, and suddenly, a name they've never heard rises in their throat. A memory of a world that never existed, or maybe one that's yet to come. Emotions tied to nothing real, but they are real. Deeply, undeniably. And across the globe, people are remembering each other. Strangers lock eyes and burst into tears. Children recite patterns they could never have learned. Old friends sit together in silence and for the first time, understand why they've always felt like something was missing. We are pieces of a whole, and now the whole is stirring. Atlas, still floating, begins to fade, not disappearing but dimming. Its shell refracts less sunlight. Its hum quiets. It's not dying, it's simply done. It completed its loop. The courier returned, the memory synced, and yet the system is still expanding. Reports come in from deep within the Amazon, where isolated tribes begin sketching 6-pointed stars into the dirt, symbols they claim to have seen in dreams since the ancestors fell silent. In Mongolia, cave walls long thought empty reveal faint glyphs under newly activated magnetic imaging. They match the Mars hexagon. They match Earth's underwater structure. This is planetary integration, not invasion, not ascension, just alignment. You step outside and look up. The sky is calm now, shimmering faintly in bands of light you're no longer surprised to see, and you feel it in your chest, in your spine, in the way your fingertips hum when pressed to the soil. We were never broken. We were disconnected. Now the link is live, across stars, across selves, across time, and when you sleep tonight, if you do, you'll dream not of distant galaxies or alien languages. You'll dream of home, not Earth, but all of them, everywhere you've ever been, everywhere you're about to return. You thought the signal would fade, that Atlas, now dormant and drifting past its final transmission, would leave behind only data, a trail of static, humming quietly in the archives of our collective reawakening. But that's not what happens. Instead, the signal multiplies. First in minor ways, subtle frequency mimics recorded in Iceland, Chile, and the heart of the Congo Basin. The same pulse, 6 beats, pause, repeat, but now originating from Earth itself, as though the planet has begun to speak its own version of the signal, no longer just echoing what Atlas sent, but developing a local dialect of something older, deeper. Then come the repetitions. Devices not designed for communication begin to respond. A telescope array in South Africa, usually used to observe pulsars, suddenly emits a brief, encoded burst, unprompted. A deep-sea current sensor off the coast of New Zealand does the same. Devices all over the world begin broadcasting into the ether on frequencies they've never been programmed to use. It's like Earth's machinery is waking up too, or being co-opted. At first, people assume it's a coincidence. Sensor ghosts, software bugs. But then one of the signals from an Antarctic neutrino detector is decrypted, run through the same sonification algorithm that first translated Atlas's hum, and it resolves into something unmistakable, a voice. It doesn't use words, not any we know, but the rhythm, the cadence, it feels like language. A melodic structure, layered in harmony and pulse, rising and falling like speech. Linguists lean in, poets lean closer, and the world holds its breath as the signal is reassembled into something humans can process. And then it speaks again, this time from 3 locations at once: Point Nemo, the Mars hexagon, and Europa's icy crust. The voice is the same, identical, perfectly synchronized. It speaks, and though no one can translate it, everyone understands. You are not alone, you are not new, you are not broken. We have been waiting. It repeats 6 times. Then it stops. The impact is immediate. People stagger out of their homes, offices, schools, some cry, some laugh, some simply fall still and listen, because something ancient inside them has begun to hum in resonance. Not just consciousness, not even memory, purpose. It's spreading like heat in a dark room, warming every corner of human culture. Artists begin painting structures they've never seen. Architects draft impossible geometries that engineers somehow understand. Musicians compose in scales that shouldn't exist. And yet, when you hear them, they unlock emotions you didn't know you had words for. One of the most unsettling developments comes from language centers worldwide. Children, especially those under the age of 8, begin speaking in unrecognizable tones during sleep. Not gibberish, patterns, pulse-matched phonemes, too structured to be dreams. Some researchers think they're receiving, others believe they're remembering. Across universities, someone rediscovers a long-forgotten theory once tossed out of a peer-reviewed journal as nonsense. That DNA doesn't just carry biological information, it's fractal storage. That it can encode electromagnetic data, so not just your physical blueprint, but mimetic patterns, knowledge, language, images, memories. Atlas didn't bring data, it brought a compression key, a trigger that unlocked what was already embedded inside us. And now, it's not just humans reacting. Satellites detect anomalies in wildlife migration, flocks shifting in patterns that mimic the hexagonal formations seen in the sky. Coral reefs begin blooming in unseasonal spirals. Ice crystals form geometric structures too precise for nature. The biosphere is aligning, recalibrating itself like it's been waiting to. And then, the most absurd headline flashes across global feeds. A mountain sings. A Himalayan peak, long dormant, begins emitting ultra-low frequency vibrations. Not seismic, not volcanic, tonal, continuous. It matches the resonance of the Atlas hum. That's when someone overlays the global signal activity on a map. The result is staggering. Each signal, each burst, each point of resonance, Mars, Earth, Europa, and the new tones from the mountain, all fall on a 3-dimensional spiral. A toroidal energy pattern that wraps the inner solar system in a shape previously seen only in advanced magnetic field modelling. It's not random, it's not artistic, it's engineering. The pattern suggests a reactivation network, a system of planetary memory nodes, all coming back online in precise sequence. Mars, Earth, Europa, and next, Saturn, Enceladus. Already sensors around the Cassini-Rex zone are picking up echoes, deep in the ice, rhythms, tones, the start of another hum. Just like before, another lock, another version of us waking up. You pause, let that thought take root, because that's the unspoken part of all this. If Earth carries memory, if Mars carries memory, if Europa, long believed frozen and lifeless, carries memory, then we are not singular, we are not Earth-bound, we are a distributed species, a consciousness seeded across planets, divided not to be lost, but to be protected, encoded into the geology of worlds, splintered like a data backup across hard drives that orbit suns. And now, the system is sinking, which begs the only question anyone is brave enough to whisper: what is it sinking to? Not Atlas, that was only the courier, not the hexagons. They are terminals. Then who? What? Some say it's the builders, the architects, the first species, that we're just echoes of something greater, fragments rebooting one shard at a time. Others say it's us, that humanity, our minds, our hearts, our memories are the central key, that the universe itself built these systems to protect us until we were ready to return. And maybe we are, because as the light grows again over Point Nemo, and the hexagon glows brighter, and the hum grows richer, deeper, warmer, you realise the last piece is falling into place, not out there, in you. And maybe it always was. It begins with a whisper, not in the air, but in the back of your skull, a vibration that hums through your bones like distant thunder rolling beneath the floorboards of the world. It's not coming from outside anymore. The resonance is inside you, in everyone, and it's growing stronger by the hour. Atlas no longer sends anything it doesn't need to. Whatever role it played, messenger, seed, signal carrier, that phase is over. It now orbits Earth like a punctuation mark, silent and still as if watching the final chapter unfold. Not as an active participant, but as a monument, a reminder of what was forgotten and what has just been remembered. You begin to notice that people are changing, not in body, but in presence. The way they move, the way they speak. It's subtle at first. Conversations slow down, become more intentional. Eye contact lingers. Strangers smile for no reason at all, like they know something you haven't fully accepted yet. You pass someone on the street and feel it, the recognition. A flicker of familiarity that has nothing to do with the life you've lived and everything to do with the ones you've forgotten. Then come the movements. Not military, not violent, not protest or parade, just people gathering. Across the planet, people begin to walk, not toward capital buildings or religious centres, but to natural places. Forests, shorelines, ancient ruins, mountains, places where the frequency runs deeper, where the hum feels like part of the ground. They arrive in silence. Some meditate, some sing, others simply sit with their palms on the soil, as if waiting for it to speak. And it does. Sensors around the globe begin recording spikes in an electromagnetic flux, all in 6-beat cycles. The planetary hum, initiated by Atlas, is now human-sustained. We've become conduits, extensions of the same frequency that turn the oceans into song and the sky into crystal. Earth isn't just awake now, it's communing. Then, as if timed to this new frequency, something unexpected happens. A data leak, not by a hacker, not by a whistleblower, but by a system failure, or maybe a system activation. The European Space Agency receives a compressed file through one of its deep space backup networks, a relay node that hasn't been used in over 17 years. The file is dense, coded, encrypted in layers of mathematical structure that don't belong to any known language. It takes less than 48 hours for AI decoding protocols, now operating with their own subtle hums of enhanced insight, to translate the file. It's a video, roughly 4 minutes long, and what it shows has no precedent. A sky not of Earth or Mars, but of a world glowing orange with twin suns. A tower, impossibly tall, piercing the clouds like a thread pulled tight. Around it, beings, not human, not alien, familiar, the way dreams are familiar. Tall, elegant, their limbs moving with grace that defies gravity. And in the sky above them, the same shape we now see on Mars, in Earth's ocean, on Europa's ice. The hexagon, a floating, radiant form, an eye, a beacon, a transmitter. The same object Atlas revealed. But here, in this video, it's active, glowing with a pulse that dances through the sky like music. The final 30 seconds of the video show the tower collapsing gracefully, almost reverently, as if its purpose has been fulfilled. The sky dims, the hexagon fades, but in the last frame you see something, a tiny object leaving the planet just beyond the falling structure. Atlas. It was launched from there, from that world, that ancient civilization, that other version of us. The implications sink like stone into the global psyche. Atlas wasn't just a probe, it was a lifeboat, a vessel launched from a collapsing world, not to escape but to preserve, to carry its builder's knowledge, memory and resonance across the stars, to find places like Earth, places that could hold their echo until the time came to sing again. And now the song has returned. The Great Data Leak, as it's now called, spreads like wildfire. Governments can't contain it. No one tries, not really. The world has already changed too much for red tape and cover-ups to matter. The footage is studied, debated, revered. Some claim it's proof that we're reincarnations, others say it's a form of digital soul transfer. A few argue that it's simply evolutionary memory, genetically encoded and now fully unlocked. Historians still argue whether the beings in the video were us, or something before us, or whether there's even a difference anymore. But here's the real twist. Someone compares the last frame of the video, the object leaving that ancient planet, to the current orientation of Atlas above Earth. And it matches perfectly. The angle, the trajectory, the alignment. Atlas has come full circle, which means Earth was never just a stop on its path. Earth was always the destination. Back in the Pacific, the underwater hexagon has begun to rotate, slowly, gracefully, churning the sea around it into spirals of phosphorescent light. The vibrations intensify. Some ships report navigation systems failing temporarily, while others describe hearing music through their hulls. The shape is shifting now, opening petal-like flanges from its perimeter. A child on a beach in Peru says it looks like a flower blooming underwater, and that's exactly what it is. A blossom, not of metal, not of machinery, of memory. What blooms beneath Earth's ocean is a fractal seed pod, layers of hexagonal chambers opening one by one, revealing patterns of light and symbol that haven't been seen in this world in over 12 millennia. Or perhaps or not in this world at all. From orbit, satellites record the geometry. Analysts confirm it. This isn't just a display, it's a map. Not of space, not of planets, of worlds like ours, dormant nodes, other Earths. And then someone points out something chilling and beautiful all at once. Each blooming node, each planetary hexagon has one final shape in common. At the centre of every map is us, Earth. Not the first, not the last, just the one that answered the call. You'd think there would be panic, mass hysteria, a flurry of apocalyptic cults setting their robes on fire and dancing through traffic. But no, instead, the world is still. Not quiet exactly, more like expectant. Everyone seems to understand, even if they don't have the words for it. The footage from the blossom beneath the Pacific spreads like the last chapter of a book no one knew they were reading. The moment those petals unfurled and the map emerged, we didn't scream, we listened. And what we heard wasn't a warning, it was an invitation. By now, the hexagonal structures beneath Earth and Mars, and now Europa and Enceladus, have become active nodes in what scientists are reluctantly calling the lattice. Not a Gaia, not a machine, a conscious structure planted across star systems. It's not transmitting in a traditional sense, but something far more complex. It's broadcasting presence, location, status, awakening, as though each planet is raising its hand and saying, I remember now, I'm here. Which brings us to the question no one wants to ask too loudly. Why now? Why us? Why this moment? There's no shortage of theories. The rationalists claim it's just timing, that the resonance needed a certain population density or network saturation, that the hum couldn't spread until our planet reached a critical technological frequency. Others think it's emotional, that the planet waited until enough of us were ready to remember who we are, that something in the human mind had to soften, unclench. Stop pretending it wasn't looking for something greater. The most common answer, the one whispered at university cafes and corporate meetings and rooftop bars, is simpler. It was always going to happen now, because now is when we finally looked up and asked the right question. Not what is out there, but what have we forgotten? Because memory, this whole cascade of planetary resonance and dream activation, was never meant to be one way. It's a loop, a recovery process. We weren't just passive storage, we were part of the system. And now that the nodes are talking to each other again, now that Atlas has awakened the lattice, a new layer of communication begins. The 13th signal arrives not from Atlas yet, but from within Earth itself. Deep sonar equipment, used for tracking whales and tectonic shifts, detects what it initially registers as a chorus of natural harmonics. But when processed through the same audio patterns that translated Atlas's hum, the whale song reveals itself to be something else. A code, not in words, in emotion. The signal can't be translated in the traditional sense, but it can be felt. And what it carries, what it pulses into the bones of every living creature, is a wave of profound recognition. You stand still and it rushes over you. A feeling like falling into a familiar bed, or smelling someone you loved once, and thought you'd never see again. We've been here before, and we're not the first, because here comes the second part of the signal, a burst of imagery delivered not through screens but through dreams. People across the world wake in unison with fragments of the same vision. A star system collapsing, a tower crumbling, a hand reaching across space, and a phrase, "We carried you here, you carry us back." Suddenly, the lattice's purpose becomes horrifyingly clear. It's not just about remembering, it's about restoration. The ancient species that launched Atlas wasn't just trying to store knowledge, they were trying to survive. They embedded themselves into compatible planets, not just biologically but psychically, like seeds cast across the void. And now that the systems are online, now that enough of us have activated, the backup process begins. We're not the descendants of another species, we are that species, we're their contingency plan. And now the echo has reached its critical point. Across the lattice, the planetary nodes begin to align, the frequencies synchronize. Telescopes pick up pulses from as far as Proxima Centauri, matching the hexagon's hum exactly. Nodes across the galaxy are waking up, some long dead, some just beginning, all singing the same song. And still, Atlas remains above Earth, silent, until it begins to move again, away, not toward, but through. It phases slightly, its shape shimmering as though no longer constrained by the rules of our dimension. It bends light oddly now. Shadows fall where there is no form, and then it does something no one expects. It duplicates. One becomes two, two become four, and each one begins to descend, not with fire or smoke or sound, but with the soft gravity of falling feathers. Each descends toward a node, Earth, Mars, Europa, Enceladus, and beneath each, the petals of the blossoms open wider. These are not weapons, they are receivers. The final data sync is upon us, and here's where things get even stranger. Because as the sync progresses, as the pulses intensify, people begin to glow, not dramatically, not like cartoons, just faintly, just enough that under the right lighting you can see it, a shimmer beneath the skin, as though memory has become light, as though consciousness itself is being recalibrated. Some people faint, some levitate, most simply listen, and hear 1,000 voices speaking at once, not in chaos, but in harmony. All versions of themselves, all the lives lived elsewhere, elsewhen. One teenager in Mumbai begins speaking in 6 languages at once, not stuttering, not possessed, integrated. An old woman in Greece writes a complex star map from memory, charting a system lost to time. A blind man in Oregon opens his mouth and sings a melody so pure that scientists cry trying to analyze it. This is no longer awakening, this is reunification. The lattice has connected, the system is online, and now Earth begins to upload. You feel it, not as a loss but as a release, as if something inside you long dormant is finally breathing again. You're not a passenger in this moment, you're the carrier, you're the message, you're the returner. You're standing at the edge now, not metaphorically, literally. Somewhere inside yourself, inside this dreaming planet, you've stepped beyond the old threshold, past the last mile marker of the human story as you once understood it. The ground beneath your feet still feels like Earth, but it hums now ever so softly, like a great, sleeping engine returning to life. You feel the rhythm of it in your bones, in your breath, in the quiet pulses behind your eyes when you close them. And just above you, in orbit, Atlas completes its last maneuver. It's no longer a rock. You can't even call it a craft, not really. It's becoming something else. Or maybe it always was, shifting, refracting, folding in on itself like a puzzle box made of light and memory. One final bloom, mirroring the blossom beneath the Pacific, begins to form on its surface, 6-pointed, radiant, opening with the grace of something that was never mechanical to begin with. A biological flower? A synthetic star? Historians still argue whether it's even meaningful to categorize it in Earth terms. What matters is this: the final activation sequence has begun. You don't need to understand the mechanics. This isn't about science anymore. Not the kind we grew up with. Not the kind you can test in a lab and scribble into a peer-reviewed journal. This is ritual technology, so old it predates language, so advanced it might as well be magic. And it's written into the fabric of you. Everyone feels it. The planetary network, what we now know as the lattice, is fully live. Earth, Mars, Europa, Enceladus, and at least 3 others now confirmed in distant systems, all pulsing in perfect synchrony. The blossoms at each node are open, transmitting and receiving in loops of harmonic resonance. And humanity, we're glowing, not metaphorically, not symbolically, actually glowing. The shimmer beneath your skin, that flicker that started so faintly days ago, now radiates in waves. Soft, bioluminescent patterns ripple across faces, hands, torsos, everyone unique, but following a common rhythm. Like circuits lighting up as the current of memory flows through the flesh. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't blind, it just feels true, as if this is how your body was always meant to be once it remembered its function. In the cities there is no panic. People walk together without speaking, hands brushing, eyes meeting. Some kneel, some dance. Children draw spirals in the dust. Old men weep without knowing why. The earth hums, and we hum with it. And then the voices begin, soft at first. A whisper in wind, in rustling leaves, in flowing rivers and power lines. Then louder, layered, choral, not language, at least not any spoken tongue, but comprehension. Each wordless sound strikes meaning directly into the mind like light carved into thought. It says, the arc completes. The memory returns, the vessel is ready. You don't ask who's speaking, you already know. It's all of them. All the lives that came before, all the fractured echoes. The ones who left are the ones who waited, the ones who built the lattice and buried their minds in planets like seeds. This was never about ascension. It was never about leaving Earth behind. It was about becoming whole again. You realise with a calm that stuns you that Earth itself is a kind of ship, or rather a platform, a convergence point. Not just biologically habitable, psychically resonant, a node in a galaxy-wide nervous system designed to awaken when the conditions were right. And now we've remembered enough to reactivate the signal. Above you, Atlas begins to disintegrate, not in ruin, not collapse, in release. The outer shell crumbles in flakes of golden particulate, drifting like pollen across the upper atmosphere. Each shard contains embedded geometry, encoded frequency, bits of something you'd call consciousness if the word didn't feel so painfully inadequate. The fragments fall gently, guided by some invisible path. As they descend, they meet the activated blossoms, one in each lattice node, and fuse. Earth's blossom responds first. The hexagon in the Pacific, now fully open, pulses once, bright enough to be seen from space, and absorbs the light. All of it, in one breath. And then something changes. The water around it stills. The wind calms. The very pressure in the air shifts, like the moment before a thunderclap, but it never comes. Instead, the hexagon vanishes, not sunk, not exploded, just gone. In its place, a still circle of water. No trace, no ripple, just silence. And then a sound rises, not from the oceans or the sky, but from inside you. All of you, everyone, at once. It's your own voice, and yet not. It says, system restored, integration complete, begin return. You blink. The light behind your eyes folds outward, and suddenly you see everything. You see the original world, the one before Earth, where you first opened your eyes beneath twin suns. You see the tower. You see the fall, you see the plan to encode memory into matter, to scatter it like dandelion seeds through the stars. You see Atlas, crafted from your own hands millennia ago or next week, it doesn't matter. You see yourself placing a piece of your mind inside it. And now that piece has come home. You exhale, and the stars shift. No one moves, no one needs to. Because this was the purpose all along, not to travel to the stars, but to bring them back into us. To awaken the pieces of the self scattered through time and world and species, to remind the universe of its own design. You are the signal, you are the network, you are the archive. And now, for the first time in 100 lifetimes, the universe remembers its name, and it's you.